Hello, my name's Megan McCombs-Hayes, and this short video will be a review of Professor Chin's 827 Lexis class. I will cover specifically how to create a good search, secondary sources, primary sources including statutes and cases, and then finally updating or, as we talked about yesterday, shepherdizing. Let's go ahead and log on to Lexis. So remember, when we're creating an efficient search, a couple of things I want to remember is I want to make sure that I only choose the broadest 2 to 3 terms that are going to encompass really what I'm trying to research. And then second, I want to make sure that I'm using those terms with terms and connectors. So just a refresher, I'm going to want to make sure that I know how to use those here under Advanced Search. So I would click Advanced Search if I don't remember the different connectors. And this list right here, if I clicked on View All Connectors at Command, it's going to give me all of the different connectors that help me manipulate my search so that I am in charge of the way that it runs instead of the system telling me or returning results that are going to be less specific to what I'm looking for. So initially, remember, we're doing child with an exclamation mark, and then we're choosing the and as our connector, and the and is the broadest. It just makes sure that 2 or more words are anywhere in the same document. And then I'm going to choose also vaccinate with the exclamation mark. Just a refresher, and also here on our screen, the exclamation mark brings in all alternate forms or endings of that word. So we would get vaccinate, vaccination, and that's what we want to make sure that we can encompass all of that. We'll go ahead and hit search. So we naturally default to cases, so I'm going to go over here and start with secondary material first. So secondary material, remember, is an overview and synthesizes the law so that it's easy to understand how to apply specifically child vaccination and then all of the different laws that come into one nice document. I'm going to then find a couple of different things from this. I'm going to get my main sources, so remember it pulls out my main legal sources for this particular issue, and it gives me a good understanding of this particular issue of law so that I can go in and have a better understanding when I'm reading through the cases what I'm really looking for. A third thing that I did not talk about yesterday that also can be helpful when looking at secondary sources is pulling out additional search terms. So remember how I said to make sure that I also have some sort of way of keeping track of the cases and the primary sources that I see in secondary sources. I also, on that piece of paper, wherever I'm keeping track of my cases, am writing down additional search terms that I might want to use to narrow my search later on to find more cases that are analogous to my specific fact scenario. So under category, I have 3 main types of secondary sources. Treatises, remember, are your broadest type of secondary source. They're written by the leading practitioner in their field of law. They're going to give you the most overview of that particular topic. Underneath that, and if you know a little bit more about your topic, this will be the place where you start. This is a jurisprudence, and jurisprudence just means it encompasses more than just one type of source. It's going to be your ALRs right here, your American law reports. They're legal encyclopedias. They're there mostly to give you a brief snapshot or an overview summary of your topic, but mostly to give you a nice long list of cases that are applicable to that particular issue. So here, this one talks about construction and application of National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Now, this is specifically applying to a federal statute, so I'm probably not going to find what I'm looking for here within for my Oregon state statute. Remember, there is a difference between searching federal law versus researching state law, and we really want to stick, in our particular case, to Oregon state cases. For this particular issue, though, or this video, we're just doing Washington again. So ALRs are going to be helpful. Remember, they give you a quick summary, give you lots of nice cases that are going to be on point and relevant for your jurisdiction. Above or beneath that then is going to be your CLE materials, very similar to ALRs, some explanation, nice list of cases. And then finally we have law reviews. The purpose of a law review, if you think of it as a large puzzle piece or a large puzzle, is it's that one missing piece. So they're very specific, and I believe result number 2 is a law review. So you can see vanishing vaccinations, why are so many Americans opting out of vaccinating their children? Very specific. It was published about 14 years ago, so it might be relevant within the last few years, talking about what might be helpful for this particular issue. But if this is not your issue, then it's going to be a waste of your time to read through this particular law review article. My suggestion, particularly when doing state research, is you're going to find most of what you're looking for probably within jurisprudence, maybe a little bit within treatises, and then some law reviews also might be helpful. But if you know nothing about your topic, remember treatises are going to be the most helpful because they'll give you most explanation, and then jurisprudence, and then finally law reviews. The next thing we're going to go to then after that is to find our statute. So we're going to go down to statutes and legislation. Remember, everything on the left-hand side is how I filter my search results. So I have a couple of different things I always need to make sure once I'm in primary sources. So we're outside of that secondary source. Now we're in primary sources. These are everything that I can cite to. This is the law. So first thing I want to pay attention to is I want to make sure that I find my appropriate jurisdiction, which is going to be Washington again. And then the other thing is remember there's a lot more here than just my specific statute. So I have codes, which are going to be the same thing as statutes, and everything else, remember, on that list is just how my statute came to become codified. So that process and all the different legislation pieces that go into that process. So here I have 6 different statutes. In order to choose a good statute, I want to read the title of the statute, then I will look at the description of what's underneath it. There's a couple of different ones that can apply to our specific issue. We'll just start with this mandatory age exemption through July 19. So once I'm in a statute, there's a couple of things that I always want to make sure that I do every single time. And this is a short snapshot of what I would typically do for statutory research, but just understand you will get there. So first thing, obviously, I want to read the entire statute to make sure that I understand the statute. Even if I already knew that 1A, let's say that was my specific piece that applied to my issue, I still would read all the other subsections. Most statutes are not that long. It shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes. Then, in order to apply my statute, I have to use cases and the way that the courts have interpreted the application of this particular law. So in order to do that, there's a couple of different places I'm going to check. The first place is go up to the top, and I'm going to go to Notes to Decisions. So these are what are annotations, and they are like a legal index of the main legal issues that are being addressed within this statute. One that might be helpful might be immunization. Maybe if you have depends on your particular issue. I mean, there's not very many cases, and in state particular statutes, you're not going to get a ton of cases in general. So this would be the first place I check, but this isn't really telling me anything specific for my issue. So remember, the other place that I'm going to look for all of the cases that have cited this particular statute are going to be Shepard's. So my Shepard's report, remember, Shepardizing is doing 2 things for me. It's linking everything that's ever cited this particular statute or any document, so it's linking it all in one report, and then it's also updating it. So remember, everything in this particular report occurred after the enactment of this particular statute. So then I know that it's updating it and applying the law within this for the most current application. Citing decisions is just the list of cases that have analyzed this particular statute. Underneath here, other citing sources, you'll see includes everything else. So my secondary sources, any sort of regulations, any sort of court documents, they're all going to be in that particular tab. Couple of things, again, I need to make sure that I pay attention to. I always want to make sure that I'm filtering just to my specific jurisdiction. So notice that there are some federal court cases that have analyzed this statute. I only care about Washington state cases. And then from here, I can go down and I can add in additional search terms. Maybe I would add an exemption, or maybe I would add in vaccination, but here's where I can create maybe those terms that I didn't see appear in my list of annotations on the previous page. I can filter them now so that I'm just finding the relevant cases for my particular statute. All right, so as a refresher, read the statute, look for then cases that apply and interpret my statute under notes decision. Most importantly, make sure you shepherdize the statute, that you're pulling all of the cases that have analyzed this particular statute. Next thing we're going to look for is then also going to be our regulations. So regulations also tell me how to apply the statute. I'm going to go under Administrative Codes and Regulations. And again, super important is making sure that I stick to my jurisdiction. So I have Washington. And then under category, I'm going to make sure that I choose my regulation, which is going to be Administrative Codes. So I go ahead and select Administrative Codes. And here, these regulations are just going to go more into telling me how to apply my particular law, my particular statute, and what I need to do in order to make sure that I'm appropriately applying that vaccination law. There's not very many of them. Again, I can use my search terms to look for child and vaccination. I might type in the term exemption. And notice I only have one. So it's giving me the definition of what does it mean to be exempt. And that sometimes definitions can be very helpful because they'll tell you exactly what you're looking for. So we didn't specifically look through a regulation yesterday, but a regulation is going to look somewhat similar to a statute. It's going to give you a little bit more explanation. It looks very similar in the sense that it looks like a nice long list of rules. And this is how you would just apply this. Just notice that I also have some other sources over here that might be helpful to help me figure out the application of this. All right, so now that we've gone through regulations, finally we would go through and look at cases. Again, remember, as I'm walking through each of these steps, looking at my statutes, looking at my secondary sources, I'm making a note of the cases and the statutes or any primary law that I've come across, so that I make sure that I check through it as I go into my final step, which is looking at my cases. Again, first thing I want to make sure I check through is my jurisdiction, so I select Washington. And then from here, the other thing that I always will make sure that I'm select as far as a filter within the cases database is I want to look at reported cases only, because you cannot cite to an unreported case. It is not binding. So it would be persuasive, which you will talk about later on. But at this point, just know these are the two filters that I always apply when I'm in this particular page: jurisdiction and then reported. I can also add in my other term, exemption, and see if there's any cases that talk about exemption. There's 6, and that's really narrowed my field. So notice above, if I do not want any of these filters, all I have to do is click out of it and it'll rerun my search. So there's 6. I've already looked at this one. We looked at this one in class yesterday, so I might want to go through and make sure that I'm looking at my other 5 if I haven't seen them already. Remember, at the beginning of every case is all of the editorial content that helps attorneys quickly figure out, is this case going to be helpful and on point for me? Remember, all above is going to be my list of my terms that appear in the document. Case summary is like a case brief. And then underneath here is going to be all of the main rules that are applied specifically in this case. So you'll notice that we pull out statutes because it's a rule, and then we have the main legal rules that are coming also within this case. To link into where that appears specifically within the text, I just need to click on HN2 or the head note, and here is exact language taken directly from the case. So very helpful in figuring out, is this case on point, is it not on point, is reading through the head notes, because head notes are the actual rules of law taken directly from the case. So if my main legal issue is not appearing in the head notes, it may not actually be talked about in depth or giving any analysis within my case. So this is a really good place to make sure, am I on point? All right, finally we have shepherds again. So making sure that when you actually cite to something, you are citing still good law. This is where these symbols come into play. So let's go ahead and shepherdize this document. Again, citing decisions, remember, is just the list of cases that have analyzed this specific case after. So they've looked at the law and said either we are upholding it, or we are overturning it, or we're changing or modifying it. Here under the analysis, it will show you a list of all of the cases that have done that. So yesterday I talked about how cases will come in and give it some sort of distinguishing pieces. Well, they'll say, okay, we don't like the way that this is applied. We're going to expand its reach, or we're going to apply it differently. We're not saying it's no longer good law, but in our fact scenario, maybe we're going to apply it slightly different and tweak it. These cases are the ones that sometimes can be very helpful in helping you figure out the nuances of your particular issue and how these main cases might apply to your fact scenario. The followed by cases are just going to be upholding everything within this particular case as it is. They're doing nothing more than just saying we're good. And then finally, my neutral cases are not doing anything. They are just citing it. They're not giving any application of the law. If I were to go into my distinguish by cases, I would click on distinguish by. And then specifically, I'm going to select the distinguish by case pinpoint page. So in re marriage, pinpoint page, and this takes me directly to where this application, this new application of in re custody of Smith occurs on that page, all right? That is a quick review of the session that we had yesterday in Professor Chen's class. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. My information is all on the Lexis homepage, and you can always email me at any point, and I'm on campus almost every single week. And if you ever need anything immediate, one thing that I forgot to point out yesterday is the instant chat. So above on this particular screen, I can go up to more, and then I can go to live chat support, and this connects me to an attorney back in Dayton, Ohio, and I just need to type in my question, and then they will come on and answer it within about 30 seconds. And then you'll be able to work with them and figure out what you're missing or help you find what you're looking for. Thank you and have a good day.